totally didn't grow up in the church. I was born in Alberta and living with my mom and my dad. There was a fair bit of issue at home, so we ended up, my parents ended up splitting, and there was a lot of custody battles, and we were back and forth between parents, and living with my mom for a while and then with my dad for a bit. Fairly crazy. Both my parents were at the time into a fair bit of alcohol and substance, and a fair bit of conflict that I remember, 5, 6, and 7. Sometimes that conflict was, my mom coming over with a boyfriend and literally breaking windows in the house. I remember battles where we would have to jam the door so that it couldn't be opened, and a lot of physical battles. And I think I looked at my parents, I looked at my situation and just knew something wasn't right. I remember having an argument probably when I was 9 or 10, and just in that moment kind of said, I'm not relying on you guys anymore. I'm not, it's my life, I'm in charge now. And I think a lot of that was my mentality going forward, in that I wasn't going to rely on guidance really from my parents. I was going to make my life and make it on my own. There was a custody battle, and we ended up, custody was given to my father, and a lot of that was because of issues with my mom being involved in a lot of things, and it was kind of unusual at the time for kids to be granted custody to the father, but it was really just a result of where my mom was at and the things she was into at the time. Yeah, I think that was just kind of hard, and then, once custody was granted to my dad, we ended up moving out, and I was one of 4 kids at the time, and so we moved out to Ontario, and we moved in with my aunt and lived with her for a number of years as my dad kind of got into a position where he can kind of manage things himself. He worked shift work, and so he'd be working at night, and we'd be home, and we stayed a lot with our aunt. And I was raised on Coke and craft dinner, and to us there was a lot of instability, which resulted in us just probably not being in a great space, getting into trouble ourselves and that type of stuff. So we were very busy kids. I remember times when I was 7 and 8, and just doing things with the kids, how I treated other kids. I remember clotheslining another kid for his cheesies, and it was always a big thing. There was always a lot of conflict. And as we grew up and I got older, I got into a lot more trouble myself. So I definitely got picked up more than once for damaging, just breaking windows and stuff, but every time I was arrested it was for shoplifting. For some reason I seemed to enjoy shoplifting, and as I got older it became more of a challenge, and it was really just about having fun and doing stuff. But we would steal ridiculous things. We would steal all kinds of things, so whether it was magazines or larger objects, ice cream cakes out of ice cream shops, all kinds of little things. By the time I was 12, I was arrested. I had been arrested 3 times, and the third time when I was 12, that was my last year as a young offender, and I remember having me sit in the jail cell for a while, just kind of scared straight kind of attempt. And as we grew older, my older sister, she, by 13 and 14, she was starting to leave the house and not come back. By the time she was 15, she was out of the house and with friends and just not coming back at night. And my younger brother and sister, a fair bit of challenge on their side, because just mentally they were dealing with a lot of problems and lacked a lot of skills just to manage emotions, etc. So as I got older, we ended up moving and was doing better. And when I was 16, just 15, 16, I ended up with a group of friends where, again, we were getting into a fair bit of trouble, and just maybe with that past of shoplifting, started doing it again, got caught again, and it's interesting because usually when I would get in trouble, I would just go, here we go again, right? There's going to be a lot of yelling, there's going to be a lot of punishment. This time, I got caught stealing something stupid, and I didn't get caught by the shop owner. It was just a customer who saw some kids up to something, and they grabbed me and my friends took off, and brought me into his shop and told the shop owner what was happening. And okay, we got to call the police. I'm like, oh great, here we go again. And something was really different with him. He sat me down. I just stole from him, and he said, well, the police are on their way, we'll get this figured out. Talked about, well, this is my dad's shop, he's going to want to press charges, and, like, oh, great. But then he started to ask me questions, he said, well, you want to read the comics? Here's the comics. And I said, oh, okay. You want some ice cream? And I'm thinking, I just stole from you. You're offering me product now. Anyway, that just got me thinking. And I had a guy I knew that, I think he kind of knew I was probably in a down space, just got myself in trouble again. And he just invited me to come out to a youth group. And I, at the time, said, what's a youth group? To me, I've never heard of such a thing. So he invited me out, and at the time, I was spending most of my time out of the house anyway. So 4 or 5 days a week, I would just not be home. And so I said, yeah, sure. And so I ended up going to this youth group. I remember sitting around watching the other kids, trying to figure out what's the deal. What are they? They're singing, they're talking about God, they're reading. So I thought that was kind of odd. And then towards the end, I think the thing that struck me the most that first night was, at the end they had kind of a pickup volleyball game. And I hung around, and I just remember sitting and watching them play and trying to understand why they weren't making fun of each other. They were terrible. I was just like, these guys are really bad. Anyway, and I thought that these guys are just all a bunch of fruitcakes. And I thought, well, this is really odd. So I guess it struck me to the point where I said, well, I don't know what this is. It's kind of weird. But I kept coming back. I started to spend more and more time at the church. So I'd go there every week for young adults. And then I started helping out with some of the technical stuff. And before you know it, after the year, I was there maybe 3 or 4 nights a week. So within about a year, I started to think about a lot of what I was hearing and thinking, maybe there's something to this. I ended up going to a youth event, a weekend event. It was down at Cops, and at the time I was really thinking through a lot of stuff. I was still dealing with a fair bit at home. There was still a bit of conflict at home, so just contrasting life at home to what I was seeing at church. And so starting to hear the story of Jesus and what that meant and what it could mean for me. And I'm really chewing through this stuff. And I've got the worship going, and I'm really thinking through. And that's when I said, you know what, maybe there's something to it. And so it was that weekend, towards the end of the weekend, I decided to kind of respond to an altar call and go up. And I remember sitting there thinking through and thinking, I'm going to pray this prayer. And so I did that, and it wasn't any giant voice, but once I prayed that prayer, I felt a sense of calm, and I felt God's presence, and I felt that, wow, there's something here. This is something I don't know. This is something I haven't experienced. And and so that was kind of the start of my journey as a Christian. And from that point on, I was hungry. I was excited, hearing what I was hearing and realizing that there could be some truth to it. When I first started going to youth group, there was a pool party at her house. She was hosting a youth group pool party. And so I met another girl that night and started dating her that night. And the girl and I that got together, we split, and actually she broke up with me, which was kind of surprising to me because that had never happened to me before. And so that really shook me because I wasn't quite sure why. And at the time I was doing Bible studies with a group of people. And Sarah was part of that. So we just spent more and more time together and connecting. We went to a Christian concert down in the States. It was kind of that weekend where we started to say, hey, like maybe this could be something. And it was a romantic night. There's fireworks and there's concerts going and everyone's feeling good. And I leaned in for the kiss, and she kind of stood back and said, I was shocked because that's the life I knew. It was just, that's a relationship. And she really kind of questioned at the time what relationships were for me. And we had a great talk about it. And then so within the week we thought about it, or I thought about it and said, oh yeah, I really want to do this. I really want to have a God-focused relationship. I don't know what that means yet, but I want to learn, right? So understanding what life meant as a Christian, so as a young adult, and then as a boyfriend, and then as a husband, I'm still learning continually. When I read scripture, I definitely gravitate to leaning into the Lord and trusting in Him and knowing that He can supply the power I need and He can direct me. Because I know that I still stumble and I still I fall short all the time, and that's my hope, is that, you know, I'm not perfect, and God accepts that, and God still loves me, and so knowing that to me is a huge thing. I want my kids to know that too. In my mind, there's no doubt that God changed me. You know, it's obvious. If you look from where I was to where I am now, if you look at how my heart's changed, there's no question that that's God in my life changing who I am. And I don't know, that excites me, because I think God can change lives, and God changes lives today, and God changed me.